Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 5th episode of Genealogy Pep Talk, a podcast. My name is Suzanne, and I am a library specialist with Arapahoe Libraries here in Colorado. I also have two friends with me who are my fellow co-hosts of this podcast. There is Cindy, who is also a library specialist, and Katie, who is a reference librarian. Hi, ladies.
Hello. Hello.
This podcast is about gathering some tips and tricks for your family search journey for whenever you get stuck on searching for an ancestor, because it does happen. We also share with you some of our own experiences, anecdotes, and stories in researching our own families. This episode of Genealogy Pep Talk, a podcast, is going to be a potpourri podcast. In the last episode, we talked about the history of a house, or the genealogy of your house, or your family's house, or your great-grandparents' house, but we forgot that there's stuff inside the house that still needs to be dealt with. And so, speaking of potpourri, it was in everyone's house a long time ago, and maybe it's still there. People had that weird, strange concoction of dried flowers and smells. Yes, the Febreze that was invented in the 12th century, in essence, potpourri. For those people who love potpourri, I am glad that you do. For those people who do not, I understand. That potpourri bowl is in your, let us say, your great-aunt Vida's house. It was next to the butterscotch candies dish, which were wrapped and resting in a beautiful crystal bowl that she got with S&H green stamps or at her wedding or won it in a raffle. And the unveiling of said butterscotch is annoying because, yes, it rattles and can be deafening in a quiet space, and we hear it. And amazingly enough, though, great Aunt Vida, who wore 2 hearing aids, could hear that unraveling of butterscotch candies from the other end of the house. Anyway, this podcast is about those items that held that dust-covered potpourri and that other bowl that held the butterscotch candies in yellow cellophane plastic. I was at my grandfather's house in Florida in the early 1970s, and I remember a bowl with a pointy lid, and it had these weird little points that stuck up. It was made of white porcelain, and the outside looked like a hedgehog or a pineapple sticking up. It was heavy as heck, and when you are a 6-year-old little kid trying to maneuver it like you were a crane operator, you had to be quite focused. And when that lid that you were trying to hover up and over so that you could get to your target, a black licorice spicy gumdrop, without the lid making a sound, or for goodness sakes, dropping it on the glass coffee table, you had to have the television on to use as a distraction. By the way, I had a great black and white movie on that day. It starred Burt Lancaster and Clark Gable in a submarine movie called Run Silent, Run Deep.
Range. Mark 1500.
Anyway, I do not know what happened to that bowl with the heavy lid, but it is a great memory, right? It was a long time ago, but it brought back memories, and what a fun memory it was to share. The moral of this story is, whenever you see your grandparents or your great-grandparents, and if they do not mind, record their stories and ask them questions. Or perhaps if you are a grandparent yourself, record your own story and your own history. And then ask this question, or answer this question: where did you find that weird-looking bowl? And why do you have all this potpourri, which is still dusty? And I bet there is a story that they have about how they acquired the bowl. Maybe it was a hand-me-down from a couple of moms ago, or maybe they just bought it at a flea market and it was someone else's family history. And when you go to the thrift store, look at all of that family history which is sitting on those shelves, the one that's marked at the $2 special. The other thing to think about is family recipes, or that family recipe book. Now, we know about the family Bible. That is in a lot of homes, and it was handed down to family members, and there's a wealth of information written in that family Bible, so never get rid of it, especially if there's something written in it. But there's also the family recipe or family cookbook. Maybe Great Aunt Vida wrote a fabulous cookbook on how to make pickles, or how to make that wonderful casserole that always shows up at family potlucks and funerals. Or is it that great-looking cake that somebody always made for your birthday, a simple birthday cake. But these are also your family's history, your memories, your materialistic DNA, if you will. You know, they knew that you absolutely loved pickles, and so they said, you know, what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you this recipe. It is a secret, though. Shh, do not tell anyone, not even your cousin Lisa. Keep it in the family. Well, anyway, Cindy, Katie, do you have any interesting stories about any family heirlooms in either of your families?
My kids, when they were small, when we'd watch Antiques Roadshow, and they would say, "Hey, Mom, don't we have anything like that? You know, the $100,000 thing that they pulled out, you know, the Potter or something like that." We don't really have anything like that. But, you know, there are all these things that I absolutely completely remember in my mom's kitchen. And now I wonder what happened to them, too. My mom had this copper tea kettle. And when I was little, I used to polish it up for her using like a solution of, I think it was baking soda and salt and vinegar.
Mm-hmm.
And that will polish anything without scratching it. It was pretty amazing.
Nice.
So when
Good
we
hack.
look at old pictures, you know, it's like, oh, there's the tea kettle in the back. So, you know, they doesn't necessarily have to be an heirloom.
Mm-hmm.
But it can just be something that was with your family. My mom touched that, you know,
Yeah.
and she loved that, and she's not here anymore. So
Yeah.
that is a very special kind of a thing.
Right. Nice.
We have several special things in our family. When my mom was young, they owned the store in the very small town of 300 people that they lived in, and most of those 300 people were relatives. It's one of those kind of towns. They owned a general store, and it had a soda fountain.
Mm.
And so my grandmother has the back bar from the soda fountain in her dining room.
Wow.
Except for the top piece didn't quite fit on, but she has 12-foot ceilings. So this thing is ginormous, has beautiful stained glass, and it still holds most of like the soda glasses and sundae glasses and things. And they have this really old-fashioned cash register on it. So
Ooh, nice.
that's one of our big things in our family. And now that my grandparents are in their 90s, we're all figuring out, like, what the hell are we going to do with this thing?
Take it to Antiques Roadshow and see how much it's
Take it
worth.
to- I know. We would, we want to know how much. If we got Antiques Roadshow to come, it would be really interesting, except we don't want to know anyone to know where they live, because they know everybody, and, like, you know, start coming to their house and take all their stuff. But see, there was that. And then,
Okay, let me ask you a question, though, about the store.
yeah.
You had 300 people in the town.
Uh-huh.
Did you give them family discount?
Oh, I'm not sure about that, but I remember Mom talks about, you know, making 5-cent cherry Cokes, and they could eat all the ice cream and sundaes they wanted, and that's how my mom came to hate butterscotch.
Oh,
So she hates butterscotch to this day.
how fitting.
Yeah, I know, right? So she doesn't touch those butterscotch candies that are in the
Right.
jar. I eat those.
Well, it's funny. Every time I eat one of those, I think of those in my grandmother's living room in a crystal dish. But you couldn't take it yourself. You had to wait for her to offer it. You just couldn't go and grab it. That was not the thing to do.
Huh, interesting. Another thing that was really special in my family, and my uncle has them now. When I was small, my grandparents sold Yamaha motorcycles. Yamaha sent out every year, they sent out these dolls dressed in traditional Japanese clothing. And so these dolls were like really kind of unique, special thing. And my youngest uncle really liked them, so he has taken them now. For me personally, one of the things, imagine this, you'll be so shocked, was there was some books that my grandma had. They were called Little Big Books, I think. You could like flip through them, and the pictures would kind of, you know, move, and they had some text that you could read too. But last time in April when I was back for my grandparents' anniversary, I brought them downstairs, and I'm like, Grandma, can I have these? And she's like, what, you want those? And she's like, I totally forgot all about them. And so she was like, well, yeah, you can have them, but I'd like to read them first, so I'll send them to you. And I said, okay, fine. And she did, she sent them to me. But
Nice.
it was one of those things that I remember my brother and I used to look at when we were, kids. So, yeah, I was destined to be a librarian.
Yeah, definitely.
So, family recipes, there's a lot of them out there because there's, I guess, a lot of families, right?
Yes.
So,
And they eat.
so yeah,
They all eat.
and they all eat, and they always have the same recipes. You have the same meals or the same food at different functions. Like I was saying earlier, it's always that one casserole you see that goes around to every function. And I know it was in the case of my family, and it was always that great potato salad my mother made, and we'd always bring it in that Tupperware. You, Katie, have family recipes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that go back. How long do they go back, or how far do they go back?
Well, I'm the 5th generation. So I think I've talked a little bit about my great-great-grandparents lived on the Meskwaki settlement, and they traded with the
what town?
Meskwakis.
Or what state?
Middle of nowhere, Iowa. All that's there right now is the casino, and but the Meskwaki women taught my great-great-grandmother how to make fry bread. It used to be, when I was young even, we always called it squaw bread because the Indian women were called squaws, which is now not is not politically correct, and so we just call it fry bread. But so I'm the 5th generation in my family to make fry bread. I've even done presentations at the state fair through 4-H on making fry bread. It's really fun, really easy. So that's probably the oldest recipe that we have. Another one is my grandparents obviously grew up during the Depression, and there's a Depression era cake called wacky cake. You can also sometimes hear it called crazy cake or something like that, but it's just a chocolate cake that has no milk or eggs because you couldn't get those. And so wacky cake is pretty much the only cake that my family makes. And then when my brother and I were little, my mom came up with a chocolate peanut butter frosting to go on it. So now that's like the only cake we make.
Yum.
Delicious. And it's so light and airy and fluffy and moist. Oh my God, I'll bring it next time. One really unique recipe is my great-grandma's eggnog. So my mom talks about that they always had Grandma Burka's eggnog, and that she didn't know until she was a serious adult that eggnog had alcohol in it.
Right.
That's why
Or
they
that
liked it so much.
I was waiting for that.
Yeah. Or the store-bought stuff tastes awful, and so it's basically a nutmeg milkshake, and it's delicious. And so for my family, that's what eggnog is, and we make it every year, and it's delicious. But my grandma gardened and canned and pickled. She has a wonderful 13-day sweet pickle recipe that I love, and that I still make sometimes to this day. So I think part of that comes from being from the Midwest,
Right.
but there's tons of recipes. And
Did she go to the county fair and any blue ribbon recipes in your family?
I don't think, I don't know that she ever went to the county fair. I went to, again through 4-H, I'd made the wacky cake and got a blue ribbon for it.
Wow. But it's just like such a really wonderful feeling when you're making those recipes. You feel like you're close
Right.
Yeah.
to those relatives who knew you loved it and would make
Right.
it specially because you were coming or, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, like my mom, again, being Polish, Russian, Northeastern European, pierogi was a huge thing in our family. My mom would make hundreds of them at a time, and I have 2 older brothers, so they would last for a couple days. But there was something really interesting I saw on Etsy, and it's an Etsy store where the person has like a platter. And what she does is if you send her an original recipe, like my mom's recipe cards had that little old-fashioned pot-bellied stove in the corner,
Right.
that her handwriting was so perfect. And my mom has passed. So I was thinking for Christmas to do something with that recipe, to get that recipe kind of embossed onto these platters. And so you can use the platter to make the recipe. You can use the platter to serve the recipe. And 3 out of my 4 nieces and nephews are are married, so that might be, newly married, so that might be a really great way to get them to, pass down that recipe for their kids,
Yeah.
and to keep grandma's recipe in the family and her handwriting and everything. So I love that idea.
Great idea. But let's remember that we want a lot of people to listen to this podcast, but maybe not to your nieces and nephews and brothers of getting that gift.
Right. I will
Don't
make
listen.
sure.
It's a secret, people.
That's right.
My mom, when her boss's mother passed on, she did something similar and had a recipe printed on fabric and then made her and her sister's aprons with that recipe. So I know that they were really touched and thought that was really special. So that's a really awesome idea. I personally love recipes, and my mother, I've had to kind of calm her down, but my mother and grandmother both collect cookbooks, especially like those small town or local church cookbooks. And there's so much history there, and also some really good recipes and also some really weird recipes. But one of my favorite sections to look at in those cookbooks is like the other section, because a lot of times they'll have cleaning ideas for, soap or bug spray or something like that. So that sometimes it's kind of like the Farmer's Almanac. You can get some time-tested home remedies from those.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
And then those are passed down.
Yeah.
And let's make sure those pages aren't stuck together.
Yeah.
Like that one Friends episode.
Yeah, right.
Beef trifle.
Trifle, yeah.
Right. Okay, that was a throwback to the 90s, I guess, and Friends. Do you see what I'm saying is that there's so much family history, even in material things, and these family heirlooms, and you may not even think anything of it, but maybe that piece of art or that dish has been in that family for 3 or 4 generations. And how did they get that platter? Did they have to work hard and like, oh, I can't get it yet, I don't have enough money, but they eventually did, or did someone give it to them? And there's so much mystery out there that we don't know about our family history. But since this is a potpourri type of episode, what else can we share with our audience?
Well, I was just going to talk about my great uncle Frank, who lived down the street. And even if you ask your relatives, not one of my relatives ever mentioned this person. He was my grandfather's brother, and the 79.5 Cottage Street, because when I was looking on the census, they do it by the street, and so I was kind of just looking at it, and I found another Hopco, and he would lived on 169 Cottage Street, so that's like the next block over, and not one person has ever mentioned that family. And I don't know why.
And I think you have a mystery there. I think there's some sort of black sheep in the family. So that is just the nitty-gritty for us, because as genealogists, we want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Detective hat.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, it's not just what your family members tell you. It's
Right.
kind of what maybe they don't.
Right.
Who they leave out of their
Right.
history.
And so, like with a lot of things, it's the truth. What happened? Did somebody, get mad because they didn't like what was on the platter that was served? And it was a big little insufficient argument. And all of a sudden it blew up, and now you have a great big rift in your family.
Yeah, I have a good example of that. A lady that used to host our youth group when I was in high school just passed away, and in the obituary there was no mention of her husband, and so I haven't talked with them for, I don't know, probably 15 years. And I just found it interesting that, like, even if they were divorced, there was no mention of the husband at all. And so those kind of things, when you're doing genealogy and you're like, okay, there's children, what happened here? So yeah, it's it's really interesting the things that you don't find when you're doing research or.
When you're helping someone else out, it's like, ooh, this sounds like it's very detailed and could be very messy. And do I want to go deep? Do I have permission to go deep helping to search for someone's family? Because maybe they don't want to know. Maybe it's like a secret and they know nothing about it, and it would send the family spiraling out of control because there's this secret that they need to.
Well, and a lot of those
figure out.
secrets, I think, involve children before marriage.
Right.
Something like that. So
Right.
maybe did my great uncle Frank and his wife Anna, another Anna, there's so many on that side of the family, did they have a child and then before they were actually married?
Right.
Tisk tisk.
And so they were never spoken to again,
Right.
or they were, even though they lived down the street.
Right.
So those
but-
things can happen. They did happen a lot.
And yes, I agree. And what's so funny is that it's such a hush-hush thing, maybe 100 years ago, 80 years ago. But now it's like, oh, okay. And it's just a matter of the generations change. And it's not that hot topic anymore that you want to, put up some garlic and be like, get away, vampire. Do you know what I
Brought
mean?
shame to our
right.
family.
And now it's just so part of the family culture,
Yeah.
and I'm not trying to be political or anything like that, but it's just through happenstance. And I've often thought that it's, in the old days, it's a matter of tragedy or assault, or it's a matter of convenience, trying to stay warm. And and I think it's, we don't know what happened then. We would like to know. We hope it's a good story. We hope they just wanted to stay warm, you know. And we hope that it's not this tragic, serious awfulness that happened. But there are those people out there that have family members that has happened to. And there's so much shame, but there doesn't need to be that shame.
Yeah, how many
If you're
lives
struggling,
were ruined,
right.
because their parents could walk right by them on the street and they wouldn't acknowledge that was
Right.
their daughter.
Right.
Or their grandchild.
Right.
Think of all the happiness they.
Right. They just missed out on. Yeah.
Yeah, but in terms of the genealogy,
Right.
that person never existed.
Right.
I'm wondering why, in that town of Auburn, New York, my grandmother lived there forever till 2003, never talked about this person. None of my cousins, relatives, my dad certainly never mentioned this person. My dad's generation even know that this was
Right.
their uncle.
And I think some of those, especially European circles or maybe other countries, maybe Asia and so forth, but, it's a cultural thing of, no, that's something in the family we don't talk about. And here, in, what year is it? 2022? Is that we're so open. Yes, we have our privacy and our closed offness, but we do talk about a lot of these things, and it's kind of comfortable, and we're just having a conversation right now. But in the old days, I think there was, we talked about the shame, but I think also the culture of for example, the European culture where you don't talk about that. It's a very modest subject, or you don't talk about anything. It's
Right.
a hushed language. And I think that's important to acknowledge the respect, to have some things that are personal to be quiet about and not advertising it. But at the same time, you're trying to break that cycle. And maybe in genealogy, we're trying to help heal and try to get those little broken tree limbs kind of readjusted, and with the little glue kind of help it.
Yeah,
get back,
undoubtedly. And, from a detective standpoint,
Right.
it's really exciting because this person is a total mystery. I cannot wait to find out more about
Right.
my great uncle Frank and
Right.
and I'm going to go through, look for him now in other census records.
Right. I can't wait for you to find it either, because I can't wait to hear this story.
Yeah.
Because you
yeah.
know it's going to be a good one.
And in like so many interesting things, I found him by accident because I was just looking on the census record.
Right.
And, they go door to door to door.
Right.
And I was looking down, I'm like, there's another Hopco. That's weird. And I looked at the address, and it was Frank. And then I did a little bit of research into this person, and his, on the census, it lists he came from the same place and everything else. So it's got to be my grandfather's brother. And so I think it just has made me really excited to find
Right.
out about him and maybe find out why he was not mentioned in our family.
And this is why doing genealogy is so much fun.
Yes.
Because you can just be on that plateau. Oh, I've already seen this entry, 10 times already, blah, 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 blah. And then you see this other thing, ping, and it just comes up and you're like, okay, we are on a new mission. And then you're all excited. Then you get addicted. No, I can't go to bed. It's 2 a.m. I have to search this out some more.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. And so we talked earlier before the recording, but I told Cindy to also, if you're doing Ancestry, also go with familysearch.org, because it's nice to use those two websites in tandem. And because I used it for helping a patron just recently, couldn't find anything on Ancestry. And all of a sudden, it's the first entry that comes up on Family Search.
Yep.
And she did not see this entry
Great.
before. And boy, we kind of high-fived each other. And, and it was I was on a bit of a high for, a couple of hours, because it's a great feeling to be able to find that. So I'm looking forward, Cindy, to hearing about that story.
Okay, I will have to report back what
That's
I
right.
find out about him.
That's right. For the next episode 6.
Yes.
Exactly.
You bring that information and I'll bring cake.
Right.
Okay,
Nice.
that's a deal.
That's a deal.
Okay, so I have a question for you
Sure.
ladies. We've talked a little bit about oral histories and wishing that we could have recorded our grandparents and whatever. Have either of you thought about just starting to make some recordings of your own memories? Because I've been thinking about that. I mean, I love to write, but I also think it would be kind of fun to just get a recorder and just talk and tell stories of my childhood. Have either of you thought about doing that?
That's a great question, because I actually have.
Ooh.
I have, I like to yap, and sometimes I yap at home and nobody's listening. I don't even have an animal to cock their head to the left and say, what are you talking about? Anyway, so I was thinking, these are some great stories, and then I laugh about it, and I'm like, I should record it. I love doing recording and podcasts and things like that, so why not? I haven't pulled out the recorder yet, but I've also thought about I should start doing my own biography, if you will. Maybe not to publish, but just write my own stories down. I'm the last on my tree, my family tree. But I think maybe it would be interesting to share it with somebody else, when I hand over the reins of my genealogy searching to somebody else, and I can do my own oral history.
Yeah.
Suzanne, how do you feel about this? Well, let me tell you, Suzanne. That'll be an interesting thing. But I think that's important to do. I know they've said this in maybe the self-improvement world of books, write your own obituary.
Oh.
And I think that's kind of true. It's like, you write your own obituary, but you can also do your own biography. Write about what you know and the stories that you haven't told around the dinner table or having coffee with a friend or whatever. Because there's all these anecdotes. We have thousands and thousands of anecdotes, and sometimes we have forgotten them, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
then someone says something, oh yeah, I forgot that story. That's a good one.
I have to admit, I have never thought of doing that, but it's so easy now. You have a phone.
Yeah.
You can just record all that stuff and upload it into a computer or whatever. I mean, there is no reason. And things are changing so quickly. Like, even my daughter, who's 23, she's so proud because she was born before the iPhone, and she remembers when people weren't on iPhones all the time. And
Wow.
she thinks the world, and the world has changed a lot
Right.
since 1998.
Yeah.
But, because I think about my grandmother's life, 1901 to 2003,
Right.
Yep.
how did she even cope with all the technology that
Right.
that was out there, and
Right.
the way, and then people forget tend to forget the way things were. When you went to Disneyland or somewhere at the local zoo as a family and two people wanted to go this way
yeah.
and the other ones wanted to go see the elephants, how in the world did you ever meet back up?
Yeah.
How did they ever find each other ever again without texting?
My family used to joke about that because in Iowa the state fair is a huge deal, and it is the best state fair in the land. I will say that. The musical State Fair was written about the Iowa State Fair. So anyway,
Wow.
we were laughing in one of the last years that we went together as a family when we were all adults, saying, you remember how we had to coordinate when Dad and Dusty wanted to go over there and me and Mom wanted to go over here, and okay, so we're gonna meet at such and such place at such and such time, because
Yeah.
you could, and it was very possible. I mean, it was very possible to get lost, especially if you were a child, so.
Yeah, and we tend to forget that.
Oh, yeah.
And we were there.
Yeah,
We're the
exactly.
ones we were there.
What's funny is that sometimes I'm watching television, even something from the 70s or 80s, like Quincy.
Oh, I love Quincy.
And
Yeah.
anyway, and I think, just pick up your phone. Just pick up your cell phone. But they don't have cell phones. Hello. So it's, I got to walk over to the wall. I got to grab the phone.
Yeah.
I got to dial. You do that 5 more times.
Yeah.
And then you have to talk on the phone. Oh, I can't leave a message. Darn it.
Or the busy signal.
Right. Or business. Shoot. I can't text it.
Get off the phone so
right.
I can call you.
How much more trouble would Jessica Fletcher have gotten in if she'd had a cell phone with her?
I know.
Oh, using that smartphone, she could have solved everything.
She could have
Every
solved
problem.
everything in 5 minutes. My cousin and I used to write letters. He lived in New York, and because we were particularly close, and I just couldn't wait until he answered me back.
Yeah.
Running to the mailbox. Now it's like, why aren't you texting me?
Right.
See, we've already started. We're recording our oral histories right
Yeah.
here.
Exactly. Yeah. So
That's
this
right.
may be a good model for anyone out there who would like to start their oral history.
Yeah.
Right. So we have a problem. So a problem that you folks out there may have is that you have your family tree on Ancestry.com. How do you move it over? If you can, how do you solve that? We're not sure. So we're going to research that. But another way to do that, if you have a subscription with Ancestry, is just come to the library, because we have access with the Ancestry Library Edition that you can look up your information. But always, always, always print out what records you are looking at, because we guarantee, because it's happened to all three of us, that we can't find it when we're trying to look for it the next day or a month after.
Or even 10 minutes.
Or 10 minutes.
In the case of myself the other day.
But the other thing is always to use in tandem another website like familysearch.org. And I think I said this earlier, but I was helping a patron, and we were looking on Ancestry, and we couldn't find it. It was just really stumped. And then I said, well, let me try familysearch.org. And sure enough, it was the first entry that came up, just popped up. So it seems like Family Search may filter things up to the top a little bit better when you're searching. But yet Ancestry seems to have better images, even though it could be the same thing, the same census you're looking at.
Yeah, so what you're suggesting is what I'm thinking of doing is, starting my tree that's on Ancestry, I want to start it on Family Search too.
Right.
Because that way I might be able to have some of these people bubble up that
Right.
may not be coming up on Ancestry. But to your point then, so how do I replicate that? I just have to go back and search every one of the documents that are attached to the people on my tree and either print them out or do screenshots. Is that what you would suggest?
Or pay for another subscription, another year of subscription, or maybe a shortened subscription, so that you can just get that information printed out if you can, or a screenshot. Take a screenshot with your phone.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
I'd like to have the two different ones. Just
But in order to, because you just did all that work, you don't want to do it again.
Yeah,
So
no.
maybe do that. Just have a shortened subscription. I think minimum is 3 months, right? Isn't it?
I have a monthly, I think.
Oh, monthly.
And it's
So
like,
maybe you can do it for 1 month.
it's only
at
like
least.
$33, I think, for 1 month, so it wouldn't be terribly priced to do that.
yeah.
Just
I
so
just
you
want
could
to back
recover
up.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to back up, and I just
Yeah.
want.
But when you use FamilySearch.org, sometimes you'll get a little treat, like I did when I was doing my family search or my family history and putting the tree together and so forth. Is that I had this great uncle pop up, and I'm like, oh, that's him. I didn't have that picture in my boxes of photos, so I was very lucky to have that. I think, quite frankly, he's my guide in how to do genealogy, because he's the one who I got the picture of.
Right,
So,
and so where did those pictures come from? Do you know they just are from any type of source? Or?
I think they're posted by other family members. So, in essence, the people, or one or two of the people who posted on for that great uncle of mine, his relatives. They might be distant cousins of mine that I don't know about. But it was so long ago, about 4 years ago, that there hasn't been any action on it. So they probably stopped doing it, because then I might have gotten a hit or like, hey, and then we could have introduced ourselves. So I don't know. But just something to think about.
And
Right.
one reminder, too, I recently had an appointment with someone helping them try to do some genealogy, and a lot of times it said private. So people that are still living,
Right.
unless they chose to share their information, it will say private, and you won't be really able to see much about them. So just a reminder that if you see
Right.
private, that person is probably still alive. And
Maybe they have something to hide, like my great uncle Frank.
Well, that appears to be the end of our Potpourri podcast. I think in the future we'll have a few more of these. And to add to the fun, like I always say, we have a disclaimer. The three of us are not certified genealogists. We are just three people who are sitting around and having a nice little chat about genealogy. We hope that some or all of this information helps you along the way to finding your family. Thanks for listening. Say goodbye, ladies.
Goodbye, ladies.
Thank you. We'll see ya.